Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Wednesday, which means it's time for a new viewer track review video. Today we're going to start off with DjjD Hectigenic featuring Toni Leys. And if you would like to have your songs featured in one of these videos, all you need to do is head on over to the Discord channel linked in the description of this video. Go to the submissions channel where there is information for rules and such, and I will randomly choose whichever ones are in there. Pretty much it. There's a bit there. You basically make a post and then a link's there, and then I pick randomly among them. And the ones that we picked today will begin with this one. Let's see what it is all like. Is that just there? Oh, it is. Interesting. Well, here comes some of this. you kidding me with that? Anyway, the rest of this was pretty high on the majestic scale. All the musical qualities of this, including things like what you chose to do regarding switch ups and such, were all great. Everything about that's great. You might probably guess I'm going to say that this was so high frequency heavy. This was very powerfully high frequency. I had to turn this song down twice. Probably guess when. First time was around here, which is interesting. Like, okay, so like I got at the beginning, I started hearing this, and it felt like such a weird. I don't know where this was going to go, and then when the beat started to kick in, it felt. I was very impressed with how buzzy but not overdone this section was. Lo and behold, this was going to be built upon, and that it would become too much quickly, and then it would become a lot. And this section in particular, like, was like the high frequency edition adds up to being about like almost actually literally more than the low frequencies do. On another monitor I'm looking at, a different scope that's not present in the thingy. And one day I should get that in there too. But you know, there might be something coming that might make all that a lot easier. And I might just wait for that before trying to make crazy adjustments to my templates. Because this one's working out okay for now, right? But anyway, point is, come down on your highs, like a little bit, like a lot on some things. About as powerful it was here is like the maximum I would let happen. And like, that's just, some of that's preference, and some of that is a little bit, this is like fatiguing as hell. And I mean, that's pretty well guaranteed that you think that this is an okay amount of high frequencies because you're fighting how pushed down your ears are about it because you've been in it for so long. Some amount of referencing will help that calibrate your ears a bit on things that you sort of know have the right amount of high frequency presence that you prefer, that you've heard before. It might look like this, it might not. If you're doing this by choice, then like, hooray, you know, it didn't necessarily interfere flow-wise. This felt okay, just as long as I was listening to this at very low level. Low enough level that, like, and what's interesting is that it did sound good. Like, when I turned it down to be, like, that wasn't hurting anymore, I could clearly hear everything else. So it's also possible that you're following some advice, which is to say not to listen to it very loudly when you're mastering it or mixing it at certain levels and whatnot, which could lead you to do this correct kind of thing when you're looking for that, when you're essentially looking for full volume presence on some things when you're not at full volume. And so then when it is at full volume, it's a bit much. Excuse me. Anyway, coming up next, we have a whole other song to listen to called I Don't Give a Flip from Swaggerman. This is thematically on point, and that's a real thin looking waveform though. I imagine this is what you don't flip and give about. Let's find out. Neat. Well, if this was a pre-master, it's pretty well right. Like, this is what would work well into a master well designed for this kind of thing. In the sense that the drums are very, very peaky and loud. You can very clearly see them like on like outside of stuff levels wise. And that's what you push into a limit well that could get timed properly with the compressions architecture to smoosh it into a version of a track that we all enjoy. I do enjoy this style. This very like, I'm gonna try it out. Skrillex era trappy sort of steps. And I digs. Could have been mastered. If the goal was to see whether this was a good pre-master, my ruling is yes. It's not too abrasive on the high ends. At least it won't be too much. You don't have to push too hard on a multi-band on the master. But this is about the right kind of balance. You probably make some adjustments anyway. It's possible not to. Your intentions change when you hear it in a louder environment, pretty much no matter what. Which is why it's just hard to kind of pass judgment on stuff that's pre-mastered, because it's mostly guessing. It's guessing that it'll behave well. And it's also guessing that it can even be taken from a position like that to where you want it to go, let alone what quote unquote is quote unquote good. And what is quote unquote is quote. So much quotes. Am I quoting myself? Am I quoting you? Anyway, coming up next is Woowoo with no adjective describes this. Let's see if we can come up with one. That was really cool. I like many decisions that were made in this track. Mostly about how loud and how hard things should go. Like this was not a too high of a hard frequency thing. This was the right kind of balance. Mostly in the sense that the low frequencies were loud enough that to bring them down to a level that felt proper, you'd still hear this stuff, but to bring it up to a way that felt good, this won't burn you up. That's kind of the goal. Like you're ideally going to hear this loud enough that you can feel the low end, and at that level that you can feel that, you don't want it to burn you up on the high ends. You don't want to feel the high end. That is damage. That's what damage feels like. But like high frequency physical motion of your eardrums, the way that like a bass moves your body is really what damage is. I mean, to a certain extent, so is that. So is hearing the bass. But these are the sacrifices we make to live a dope life, doing dope things. But seriously, wear ear protection, Joe's. And also, when you mix this stuff, it's hard to like hold back and be objective and not to just jam it and be listening at loud levels at all times. But when you do, you kind of arrive at something like this. And let's talk about what happens when you get something like this. This is a wonderful track. Like, this has all such cool sound design, really deep like choices in terms of like a kick-ass beat. This would fit well with crazier sort of dubstep sets, but it also doesn't overstay itself. Like I'm always suggesting out to try and make things last longer than it should. And these kind of hyper complicated beats are things that are difficult to do a lot of with enough variations that keep your attention for the length of time that like other junk does. And so the choice to not do that is great. It's one of the great choices I like about this. But so the other problem though is that like you do this and it has all the right stuff. And anytime I have ever sent something like this to a label or whatever, like it gets kind of talked down at. This is kind of like Arabic. Isn't that interesting? Or Hebrew, actually, a little. Yeah, that's really kind of weird. But the point I was making is that like there's certain expectations about how far apart the energy is. Whereas it's like all this stuff has a presence in energy, and then it's kicks and snares and like how that kind of feels. And this is outside of that expectation. Except I love it. And I a little don't want it to change. I'm just saying that to you because you might want it to change. Like you might think that this fails a certain threshold of a goal you had. I don't know what it was. Especially since you said no adjective describes this. So this apparently is an unplanned adventure of experimentation for you. And my suggestion is to explore this. You know, who the hell knows who does and doesn't start new genres for stuff like this. Like, if a thing is so cool that it doesn't matter that it's mixed outside of the norm, then it just becomes a new separate thing. Do that, right? And I want this trend of snippets, of bits. Like, let's have an album of 12 of these, like, length things, right? That would just be really cool, in my opinion. And, like, if they're all like this track. Yeah. Anyway, good job, Dat. Moving on, we have Kigh with Purgatory. Wow, that's an inspiration in between bits. Let's see what this is like. Let's note the time correctly this time. like a hi-fi chill beat. You know what this reminded me of a lot? Like, this reminded me of the old Scott Fisher demo files in FL Studio. And that might be just me being biased because, like, I actually, like, a little bit grew up on those files. And they were great to me. Not because I necessarily wanted to do that style, but because they amazed me that, back at the time, that, like, they could just be songs that you could play and hear whole and, like, in a program. And this is sort of like a nicely, like, kind of matured version of that sort of style, which I now understand to be just sort of, like, the chill kind of hip-hop-y sort of R&B-esque inspiration that like newer, older, yeah, original FL inspiration. It's all lots of hip-hop, so that would be that angle. And this sort of straddles the line being between, like, the intentionally vaguely vintage sounding lo-fi stuff versus actually still sort of having the effect of it, but doing it in ways that are modern, which is what I understand now. My dad would always talk about the envelope that vinyl would have. And it's essentially like, you see how, like, here's some, like, the stuff that's happening, and then there's sort of air in between it. A CD recording of a band playing, there'd be dead air here, versus like a vinyl cut sampled, you'd see the envelope. Like, this would be like kind of like this, like, but in this case, the air is being accomplished by the actual, like, choice of sound design. But you're doing it, you did it. You made the envelope, and so we're feeling it, and that's where that's where, like, the relationship of the whole beat architecture is. But that's where it draws the line between being lo-fi or vintage or modern or hi-fi, because of essentially the method by which you make that envelope happen. And that's what's up, and sort of the whole history of that, which I just decided to say for a reason. Cool. All right. Moving on, we have Sphericz, On the Edge. Yeah, that's some brightness. All right, let's see what this is like. I have my own sound effects. XSplit, what is your time? This was a very weird song. So more, I guess, because this is what today's theme is. When I was started producing, I started with FL3 from my school's computer lab, and at the time FL4 was out, but they didn't have it. And when I decided that I needed a copy for myself at home, when we went to go buy the thing that was the current one, I got FL4, and the thing that like completely like sold me on it was FL Keys and a little bit FL Slayer, because those two were the most realistic sounding real instrument I had ever heard that I could control, like that I could use and hear. I was at this time like sample mining. That's what I was doing. I was going to like CDs and things. And like people would come to my school and do performances with like a bunch of drums and stuff, and then I'd buy their CD with the intention of sampling it. That's what I was doing at the time. And then when I heard that there could just be instruments like that, I blew my mind apart. I'm like, 2005. And I put this out because that piano is so old and it hurts. Like, FL has Flex now for free with free pianos that are all way better than that. And I might be a bit biased just for the fact that I literally lived in it, and it feels like a complexity and presence and quality of actual dirt, but only because it's the foundation upon which all things are built. In my mind about, digital pianos and in a DAW. But, okay, other thing, this song and things are not so epic that you can do the part 2 fake out, at first. You know what I mean? You could probably have done that like in the middle, like, and also to a certain extent maybe hold off on certain like DJ based effects, just because the DJs are gonna want to do them. That's also a bit personal for me, like in terms of that especially. It just felt odd for it to do the whole like it's really super epic, like unless this is like some remix of a really like prevalent thing, because then that makes sense. Like that's what you do in remixes. You do the whole like we're really like giving it reverence. But this is just the one thing. It can't be its own reverence. And that's like, I don't know what, like you can't call your thing an anthem. It has to become one. It has to be wanting to be book is not book. Okay. On to anything else about this? This was kind of long. I mean, I'm always about these things not being that long. So like the previous track, they basically one of these and ended. And that this would have been the right length for that kind of musical conclusion. And then it did it again. And then, then it could have done the part 2 fake out, and that would have been fine. But then you did it twice. And when you do super specific, complicated stuff like that twice, it glares. And that's really, you just need to change it a little bit. Doesn't have to be that big of a change. It can still be something that's like this. You can even just literally just switch out this bit for this bit. Just kind of like do a little weird little time shift. That's how much of a difference it needs to be, like not that big a difference. Anywho, other than that, it was kind of neat. Like you'd expect this to have the high frequency problems, but it does not. It appropriately staves off the higher frequency threshold, and everything else is basically the right kind of balanced. Even there's this lead element that's in here that's actually appropriately loud without imparting an even louder high frequency presence. And oh yeah, we were talking about envelopes earlier, right? So white noise is essentially the modernist answer to that. It's like the modern, very much like this is the envelope, and it's real fun to see it in action, in a real completed sense when something is made of like all envelope, where the hit itself is basically white noise derived, the background of it is white noise derived, and like the reverb of it might as well be white noise. But it also does the job. And especially when these other hits come in, like there's just plateaus of noise. But that's the enveloping around the actual thing, the actual event of rhythmic persistence, essentially, that happened has to have stuff that leads up and happened between it, or it also feels dead, unless we're trying to make it feel dead, which this track was not attempting that. It sounds a way, and it's not a way that I typically enjoy a lot of, but if you're definitely coming after a type, it's used in a lot of stuff, and used very much for this purpose. So control of it is a decent skill. Coming up next, we have Sphericz Path by Fusekit. Let's see what this is like. Scroll, damn you. All right. Noting the time. Well, I'm a fan of this type of timing too, where there is a break, but it just goes back, and it doesn't really waffle about. I enjoy doing that. So this is an example of an interesting sort of like an envelope shift problem. This is like when you make an intro or a drop, and you're thinking to yourself that like there's a sort of like a marriage problem, or it doesn't live up to one or the other. Chances are the thing that's kind of getting you is a lack of the similarity of enveloping, and also things like rhythm and whatnot. But like that wasn't the issue here. In this case, it was the envelope stuff that we've been talking about all day. So, like you see up here, excuse me, wow, the build here. We got real used to this high frequency sort of bridging, and then when this all came in. The loudness and texture and depth and all that is all super cool, but the envelope is completely different, and also like that kind of dead air is there. It's pretty light. Like there's some amount of it there. I can see some tails and stuff. It's not so dead, but it's dead enough and relative to what we were just happening. We were on this pad. That word pad. We were on this pad for a long time. So that when we came off it, it's like coming off a trampoline and feeling heavy. Like that amount of darkness feels like too much now. It feels like too much empty space. That It's like, the solution to that kind of thing is you just have that pad there too. And that's what that word means. That's what that's for. That whole class of sound is that word is to imply a thing to do what I just said. To create a background enveloping kind of sustained floor that a thing could be on. Then I had this happen. And that's like what you make the sound for. So like you're not really, sometimes you have another issue where you make a thing have like every single thing in your song has this nice cool sound and designed presence that you really want to be obvious and present all at once. But like pads are not meant for that. Pads are meant to accentuate literally everything but themselves. They're not supposed to be present or noticed. They're really one of these like you notice when they're not there kinds of things. And that's what happened here. Like the way that the white noise and the rising and the reverb and whatever other sounds that are happening here happened, like we got used to it. It like really made it like we didn't notice it was really itself until we heard everything else without it. So that's what that was. Now we need to have something here that kind of matches that, or to do something to the stuff here that creates itself and makes its own sauce. That's kind of like, I prefer that sort of method by putting on reverb on stuff that like sort of fills all the space from the content that's there. That does the job. That's just another method of doing the enveloping stuff. This is the one that I like, the reverb one. It's like I said, it makes its own sauce. This is sort of like just coming in on with just like another thing, which is also just, it's layering, good old fashioned layers. But other than that, dope beat, dope timing, dope time all around. Good on all that. And also an excellent example of pretty much all that stuff we just talked about. It's really educational day today on this padding and enveloping dynamic stuff. Coming up next, we have C by Throw Me Away. It's a flack. Block. All right, let's see how this goes.
Time has come for me to dive, to be brought down with you on my side. Love how we tie together with our memories. Don't cry, my consolation. We will die in peace. I'm so excited for it to begin. Everything screaming from within. All the emotions so now
and it just ends. A very surprising third drop. I mean, surprising in the sense that it came out of basically nothing. I saw it coming, who knows? But surprising in that like it also didn't do much different, and then it also just stopped. It didn't need to be there, did it? This is very good. This is very well done. Very straightforward. Like extremely unthreatening, solidly this. That's not really a dig. Like everything is extremely well blended. It's not too much of anything. Very straightforwardly is a song. It's like it's very pro. It's not really any other word to say about that. Like it hits every single solid nail on the head. If this were like a demo reel of like someone's mixing and mastering studio, this would be all most people needed to hear. To be like, yes, this person can do the thing, can do the pro the do the do. The do is done. Die do be did. I don't have a whole lot to say about it other than that. Really, like, it's extremely this. Good job. Yeah. Good job, everybody. Oh yeah, I guess we could talk about some pad stuff, right? Like this track does a pretty good job of also interlinking everything with a pad, but each other thing doesn't add up to being too much. And that's difficult to do because sometimes what'll happen is that like it'll feel good when everything's together, but not great when stuff's not. And I guess if everything's only ever one way or the other, then you don't have to worry about that problem. But even in here, there's enough dynamic stuff like the voice around that like it's very well done, like the way that it's handled. But that's the sort of the task of the stuff is that there's a portion of stuff in here that's designed to not necessarily be like lead present, but it's there to make the rest of the stuff that is to be there. And it is done excellently. Yeah. If you guys have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.